neighborhoods. The second is require excellence in design. Staff comment there is that that's really a matter of that when the building permit will be considered and reviewed, and also the design of the subdivision is considered with the subdivision approval. And then the final guideline is consider development agreements. And staff comment on this is that no development agreement is proposed related to this subdivision. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, receive public comment, and consider the general plan rezoning guidelines to make a recommendation to the City Council. Staff recommends approval of the zoning map amendment from R110 to HP1. And the Planning Commission can find that this application is consistent with the general plan. So on the left, you have the current zoning that's overlaid on the subdivision property. The area in green is the HP1 zone. The area in yellow is the R110, currently R110 zone. And essentially the proposal is to make the yellow area green to have the rules of the HP1 zone, which again are virtually identical to the R110. There are some minor differences. And then this is a zoom in on the parcels that would be affected. The yellow line over here on the south end of the subdivision is approximately right along here in the area, so in these parcels, and so it's making all of those parcels the same zone. I think that covers everything in my report. Does the commission have any questions for me?
Oh, thank you, Brandon.
Okay, thank you.
Any discussion prior to opening the public hearings? Let's go ahead and open the public hearing for the zone map amendment for the rezone of an R110 to HP1. If anybody would like to address us, please state your name and the address in the mic, and we'd love to hear from you.
Talkative bunch. Nobody on Zoom?
Nobody on Zoom.
Commissioner Thomas, I propose we close the public hearing, given that nobody chooses to speak.
Okay, we have a motion to close the public hearing
I'll second.
and a second. All in favor? Aye. All right, discussion. This is a recommendation to the City Council. Any discussion amongst commissioners?
It seemed to be a cleanup item.
Agreed. Yeah. I think when you get a notice that says your property is being rezoned, there's an initial like what's going on, but this changes nothing for any of the homeowners. It's really a cleanup item, and yeah, this is meaningless what I'm about to say, but in my opinion, if I would rather be in an HP zone or an R1 zone, I would, for some reason, something about the HP zone sounds more prestigious. So please don't take that as any real estate advice there, but so
Lots just went up in price.
not from my recommendation.
I mean, it would be, I guess, noted to City Council that this would be considered I guess you would say a down zone, because it is more restrictive than the R110 zone. Meaning, as Brandon mentioned, it really the only difference is the HP zone requires some additional studies, geological and topographical studies prior to development. So not much of a down zone, but it is a little bit more restrictive. Or
The price of lots just went down.
or up because they had to do studies.
I'll go ahead and move that we pass along a positive or recommend that City Council approve the zone map amendment from R110 to HP1 on this property.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Mason,
I vote yes.
Commissioner Lund,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So that recommendation will move on to the City Council. Their schedule, I think, is kind of messed up for the next month, right? So it won't be till August.
Yeah, they typically like to have the approved minutes, but we talked about, because there's only gonna be one meeting with business in August, maybe getting just that section of these minutes, even though they won't be approved, their review. But
Yeah, so, yeah, when we've done that in the past, when we've needed to get something, we've kind of done minute approvals by email. So if you want to send us, once the minutes are put together, send an email, we can approve that so they can go to council. All right. What everybody's been waiting for. Item number 9. Zone text amendment 2019-6, discussion and review of sections 3 and 4 of the reorganized land development code. Presenter will be Scott Hess.
So I'm gonna begin this again, and then we have our consultant, John Jansen, who's attending as well. So I think that we'll do this the same way we did last time, which is the substantive changes in sections 3 and 4. We'll put up on the screen and we can talk through those. This was, if you notice, a slightly shorter section than sections 1 and 2. So a little slightly lighter review. Sorry to get it to you earlier. But again, this is just a preview, the first preview of this. So I'd like to invite the consultant to come up, and then we can talk a little bit about the process from this point moving forward, how we'd like to do public hearings and kind of just make sure that there is adequate opportunity for the public to comment and have time to review this.
Okay. You gonna juggle for us, John?
I'm gonna try.
Okay.
But I forgot the balls. Yeah, so glad to be back again. Trying to get ourselves all through the reorganization that we've accomplished over the last year. You have the summary sheet, and I know Scott's gonna wade through that unless this works.
I think that works. That works.
Okay, it didn't.
Well, it doesn't work as a clicker.
Oh,
Yeah, John will be the one who helps advance it, but you can
whoa,
point to it.
I'll do that again.
Don't trust you on advancing things.
Yeah, maybe I need training here. Yeah, okay, thank you, Scott. Or whoever. Okay, so essentially a lot of things moved out of these chapters and moved to other places. And then we did a lot of state law updates, and some chapters were just super old. And we updated and tried to make them a little bit more relevant. So you have in your ordinances the PRUD, which is the planned residential unit development. We cited planned unit development was a more common term these days, and you do allow occasionally for other uses to go in there. So PUDs is the new term. You had a section on group dwellings that was separate from that, but they were very similar kind of requirements and processes. We decided to reduce the confusion between the state law group dwelling term, which is places for alcohol and drug rehabilitation, those kinds of things, and call them attached dwelling units now. And so that's a different term for you. Move the processes, section 1. If you remember from section 1, we have processes all together in one place. The density calculations, we kind of worked through those a little bit. Some of them didn't seem to make sense as we're going through. Got some nice new graphics in there, some new requirements, but again, not ones we think are substantial. Preservation of natural features and trails, trying to make sure we get connected trails and those kinds of things at least talked about in here. Home occupations, simplified that a little bit and made most of those processed as permitted uses instead of a conditional use. And you remember that conditional uses really become more of an administrative thing than a discretionary thing, right? That you basically have to base your
It's just a
decisions
feel
on
good
those.
phrase.
What's
That's
that?
just a feel good phrase. Something you don't want, they called it a conditional use. Even though it was allowed use with.
Yeah, I mean, the way to think about that is it's an allowed use that you can apply conditions that you may not have technically spelled out, but you've at least talked about in your ordinances. Okay, and the easy example is lighting, where you probably have a lighting standard in there, okay, that applies, but you might not have one for graffiti, which I think we left into the conditional use, but you maybe want graffiti paint, a logical kind of condition for that. Graffiti preventive paint. Okay, the dish antenna stuff was kind of the old monster antennas that we used to see everywhere, dishes. So that's all been updated to reflect the smaller stuff that's out there now. Wireless telecommunications really is a kind of a federal requirement on how those work. And we just updated to meet those particular laws. Sexually oriented businesses, or SOBs, as they're commonly called. Again, there were updates to that that were in state law, and you do have to have a zone that allows them. So they're only allowed in the manufacturing zone, which you basically have filled up already. Although maybe in a storage shed, something, I don't know.
Not allowed to do business in a storage shed.
Okay, anyhow. Okay, conditional use chapter, we did update.
Skip parking and loading,
Oh, did I? Okay.
yeah, which I wanted to talk about.
Where did that go?
No, he was on 5.
Oh, am I getting ahead? Sorry. It was right after sexually oriented businesses, right? In the,
Oh,
Parking is 8.
oh, yeah, 8, sorry.
You're
Yeah.
you're
Oh, I'm
getting
looking
We're
there.
almost there.
okay.
You're just so excited to get moving ahead.
Well, I guess I'm trying to follow along, and it goes from 1118 to 1119 in the document I'm looking at, but whatever.
Okay. As I said, we did move a lot of stuff around.
Okay, it's cool. It's cool.
Okay. Conditional use updated, as you know, state laws really changed a lot in relationship to that. Fencing, we just pushed that off, not as its own chapter, but moved it off to the supplementary regulations. Parking. So we did do some updates of that, tried to make that a little bit easier with some new graphics. Tandem parking was discussed, and internal parking lot landscaping. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I have a whole new, other idea, which wasn't addressed in here. And it was actually touched on when I read it, but,
Okay,
and I've said in these meetings all along, and maybe there's no traction for this, right? I'm one member of the planning commission. I understand that. Okay, but I'd like to find a way to incentivize new development or commercial development or the civic zone to have load unload zones and to incentivize that. Okay, so I want to see a parking ordinance that includes, you know, how we have math that says, oh, if you're such and such a size, you have to have so many stalls.
Yeah.
I'd love to see something that says, if you have a load unload zone, that a load or unload zone that, you know, offsets 5 or 6 stalls or something like that. The reason for that is I have a vision of the future that may involve more ride shares and Uber and stuff like that, especially as we get busier. And I'd like to see a nice place for people to get dropped off. You know, when you go to Smith's, I don't know where you live, like, but Salt Lake or something, right? It's probably the same at your Smith's. But, you know, people are dropping people off right in front of the store, in the grocery store. And, you know, but I picture movie theaters, malls, places, not necessarily a grocery store, but having a, you know, a load unload zone, much like a lagoon has going on, right? You know what I'm talking about? Where you just load,
Yeah.
drop your kids off.
Yeah.
So I think what something cool in our parking ordinance would be an incentive to that. And so I'd love to see something wrapped into that. But is that too grandiose for the scope of what you're rewriting here?
I don't think so. I've actually put that into a few other ordinances for other communities. A lot of that is this AI kind of thing that's showing up, that may show up, and those cars aren't really parking at that
Right.
use necessarily. They may be moving all over the place.
So you're 15 or you're 20 and you want to go to a movie let's say you're 25 because you want to go to a movie and then a bar. You're probably unlikely to drive if you know what I mean? You can
Oh,
get
sure.
dropped off, right? If you're hitting the bar after, for example, and you know, I just feel like the city could start to have that in their ordinance. I have another idea about parking, but I think it is too grandiose, which is for electric charging stations and stuff, but I almost think that's better left to the private entity to determine how they want to do that and incentivize that, but load unload zones
Okay,
and places for alternative kind of vehicles would be something I'd like to see in there. Maybe even, you know, if you had, then bike rack's a bad thing, but you know, if someone wants to take a bunch of scooters around, you know, maybe we have a place to put those and it can offset a few parking zones. My intention with that is to incentivize people to use these other alternative methods. If we don't plan for it, they're not gonna ever be used, because I've heard people come here and say a bunch, oh, people in North Ogden just want to drive, they don't want to walk, they don't want to walkable. We've had them say that here.
mhm,
Well, if the city were different, it would incentivize that. So that's my purpose.
okay.
And I can be the only one that thinks that, or we can,
Well, at some point, we can talk about it. It didn't really come up in our
Yeah.
work, but I can tell you parking unloading zones, something I've done in some other ordinances, requirements for charging stations in commercial developments based on the number of parking spaces, kind of a thing. And even as far as you build a new home, you have a garage, you get 220 charging in your own home.
Yeah.
And then what was the other one again? Oh, Scooters. Oh, yeah, I actually haven't dealt with that so far. They seem to accommodate corners like crazy
That's right.
everywhere I've been, but we could probably come up with something quickly for the other two.
Those other two, I said, one is as important as to me as the load unload zone. I
Yeah,
honestly think in some places that really makes sense
yeah.
to have that.
You know, I've had a few conversations with builders and brought that up with them, and at least some of them said, wow, I don't know why we're not doing that already. Okay, especially in homes, because it's, at most, it's $50 while you're, you know, building the home. So it's pretty easy to do.
Nothing's $50 in building a home, John.
Depending on, let's see, the daily cost of wire.
Well, I really wanted to
and,
see it
what else?
incorporated into our civic zone, because, right, I mean, these are things for like fireworks and stuff. I mean, parking's a mess, right? And so what if there was a way just to drop the kids off and then come pick them up after? That's a dedicated place for load and unload.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, even, I guess when you take it a step further is, you know, putting in there a mandatory drop off and pick up in any civic zone property, which would include our parks, those things. We don't even have them in our own parks, but
Yeah,
that's something that we can enforce or on ourselves, saying, hey, as we're developing parks, do a drop off lane, you know, pick up,
okay.
or
Well, I
I think
think
we got a nice amphitheater up the road
Schools.
here that doesn't even have one of those, so.
we can't make the schools do that.
Oh, don't they conform to the civic zone?
They got their bus lanes.
Okay,
They might be in the zone, but they don't have to conform. How's that? Another little state law.
Anyway, as I reviewed that stuck out. I've said that in here a lot. It kind of, I may be the only one with that desire, but
Hey,
That's a good idea.
the autonomous vehicles of dropping off and picking up has been your charge for 5 years now.
I don't even want one of those. I just want the city to be prepared for them.
Yeah. Well, I think I've got some canned language we could use, so pulling it. Okay, parking, landscaping. We did decide to really define that buffer area between commercial and residential. And we are promoting in that xeriscape kind of stuff too. So not a bad idea with all the drought. And it's not really landscaping that provides a lot of function other than separation. So it's not the beautification issue. Yes, we do have trees in there though, which does help a little bit with at least the mental separation part of it. Signs, we did go through there and put some new graphics in. You all had graphics here and there that were just about unreadable. How's that? So we tried to update a lot of that. Questions about section 3? Anything else? Okay. Section 4, essentially your
Sorry,
subdivision.
John, I just want to make one comment is that to be more responsive to the current drought, the city's looking at our vegetated ground cover, I think is what it's called. And this is actually held over in our nuisance ordinance. It's not a land use code, so it's on Title 11 or 12. You won't see it, but we will want to scrub the land use code landscaping requirements against whatever we pass as our permissible ground cover ordinance for xeriscaping right now. So it's just kind of we wanted to say it out loud as a mental note, and then also to just note for you that we're going to have another element within our code in Title 8 talking about landscaping.
Okay, is that coming up fast?
Yeah.
Okay, before we're done.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Next week.
Yeah, next week, we're looking at changing that imminently, just so that it's really to provide clarification for code enforcement
Okay,
as we have secondary water users who are shutting water off so much earlier in the year than they have. We don't want, we want people to be have the flexibility to adjust their landscaping and also not just come down on them because it's, turns to weeds earlier or something. So there's a
yeah.
line right there.
Well, and there is a lot happening with all that these days too, that some communities are starting to say, let's get away from the turf as much as we can, especially this year. Okay. You'll have to let us know, maybe we can combine those next week or something. All right, so we really already had PUDs addressed. You sort of had it twice in the ordinance, so that's now been simplified there. Sensitive lands, we talked about that quite a bit. I know Rob was working on a new version. I hope sensitive lands, which might replace your HP zones, which you just talked about tonight, was actually coming along somewhere. So, and this is just another thing that we just did to try and make it simpler as you move through. All the definitions basically moved to the definitions section in section 1. Try to make the submittal requirements clear. I think we talked about this before. A lot of times you had these long lists of everything that might go in an application. You don't really have to do that in ordinances anymore. You can have the application on file here. And if you see something you're missing, you just add to it. You don't have to have a public hearing and go through the council and everything to make those changes. So we tried to pull those out of there, and hopefully the new applications or the old applications follow what was in the ordinance. The other thing that you saw a lot, especially in subdivision ordinances, is you have all the requirements that Public Works got for every kind of possible civic improvement kind of that they would have to do, civil improvements. And those usually are also in another book of standards, which you all have. And so we just make references to those, all right, instead of trying to keep both lists essentially the same, which, creates some awkwardness. Final plat approval goes with the planning department. And we did update plat vacations, which I don't know, the state law maybe made it more confusing maybe, but it's updated. We didn't really spend much time on the HP zones because we actually did review the new sensitive lands drafts that were showing up. So we just didn't really do too much work on those, assuming at some point in the near future you'd be replacing those. Minor subdivisions, there's an allowance in state law to do up to 10 lots as an administrative thing, so staff could do those. That's pretty common in most ordinances. Development improvements, this is really the same issue that I just talked about, referencing the public works standards. Was a little bit of vagueness about what you do when you have double frontage lots, so we tried to make that nice and clear in here. Secondary water, trying to push that, and upgraded to 5-foot sidewalks everywhere. And again, these trail connections, try to make sure all of that happens. Condos, another odd thing, at least in my brain, which is basically, these are subdivisions, right? I mean, they're funny shaped subdivisions, but they're subdivisions. So you follow the subdivision process, but there's additional paperwork required for those under state law, and we just put that together and not reiterated subdivision process. So they're subdivisions. Boundary line adjustments, they changed that again. I'm not sure that was changed very well, but that's what the state did. And we have that in there. So there's two things that we thought were substantial kind of policy changes. Block lengths, I think that'd be worth taking a look at. I think that's page 12. Just to make sure that you're all comfortable with that.
Huh. Oh, you missed that discussion earlier.
I missed the hump.
We had a discussion on block lengths today as part of the subdivision.
Okay, hopefully this made, I don't know if this made sense with that, but take a look, because that is something that's a little bit different in there. What else? Oh, yeah, and here was another one. You know, you have a lot of places where you don't have continuous sidewalks or sidewalk connections that make sense. And we provided a out for that. But you're gonna wanna look at that too. Okay, that's my suggestion. So those are the two more policy oriented items that I think you ought to take a peek at. So general questions about that?
One part on there, did you say that we're changing to where final plat is just handled by staff?
Yeah,
So we'll see preliminary, and then if they meet all the requirements that we approved at preliminary, it's done with staff, it doesn't come back.
yeah. Essentially, I thought that was what you were doing anyway, or most of the time. So we just put it in there as per what you were actually doing, so.
Yeah, typically the final plat is a cursory review at planning commission level because all of the different departments have been working with the applicant to make sure all civil drawings are done and updated, all of the engineering comments are done and updated. So you really shouldn't see a final plat until it's essentially ready to record. And at that point, it's like a moot point to have it come in front of you. So we do bring back preliminary plats when they make major modifications or modifications beyond what we can, if they need to shift a lot line over, but all other things are approved, then from preliminary to final, that doesn't change it. But if they say eliminate a cul-de-sac or move a road or add a lot or, one of those changes, it bounces back to planning commission for reapproval or amendment to that preliminary approval.
So preliminary becomes the most important step, where all the reviews are done and all the comments, all of your comments are then transferred to that final plat. That staff will just manage through there. Okay,
I like it.
it does take away one more meeting for council anyway, not for you all, but for the council. And a little bit faster for a developer, assuming.
Well,
a lot of
Plat subdivisions here don't go to council, so they ended us, so that's one less for us.
Okay, so it is that way
Yes.
that you all have been doing that, so that is good. But you don't see that final again, so.
Okay, so specifically on the block length, I was trying to find that when I saw that on the, do you know what number that's on?
So that would have been nice, but I did look today, last night at page 12, if John's got that, or somebody's got that.
Page 12.
Yeah, well, at least in the handout.
Yeah, it is page 12, which is page 132.
Oh, 132, okay.
All right, so does this have a pointer? Anyway,
It does, it's the center button.
okay, that's what it says.
It actually starts on page 9. Page 12.
But it is
132.
mostly here.
Multiple page number.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, 9 on the left, 12 in the middle, 132 on the right.
Okay, that's the one I saw. Okay, so you got the long length still, and we had some discussions about that.
Well, here, that second sentence, exceptions to this prescribed block width may be permitted in blocks adjacent to major streets, waterways, or topography concerns.
Right.
Washington Boulevard is definitely a major street.
That's our current ordinance.
I didn't know that
That
was
same
in there.
language is in there right
Okay,
now.
I didn't know that was in there.
See, you're in the clear now.
Well, I didn't want to hold
You can
that,
sleep.
but
So, I mean, it is a little bit difficult in the clean copy to see what we actually changed, but by the by, I'm just gonna quickly mention that Logan Simpson, who's the primary consultant, they're gonna do one more time through, because at least when I looked at it last night, I kept finding little small typos and things, but anyway. Yeah, I think this is where we started to actually have that conversation a little bit more about blocks. So that is one to just wade through and see what you think. Part of the idea being to break them up if they're really long. That's an issue in and of itself, right? We didn't used to do those kinds of things, but there's a discussion just below there about every 600 feet. Sorry.
400 minimum, 6. You're saying having a
Yeah.
reserved connection at 600?
Yeah. So we start talking about that, long blocks, 600 or more. They require reservation easement through the block, and try to tie that to, destinations. So that, you really don't necessarily have to do that, but if there is a park on the other side or a school, something like that, you could have a mid-block passage of some sort. We'll just say that we did have a fair amount of debate about the block length discussion. So there's a lot of communities.
It's a
that have
hot
much
topic
shorter.
around here.
Yeah, well, the 1320 is pretty long, but a lot of communities are going to the 600 even for that matter. But this is what we did, try not to do too much policy wise. How's that?
And then one of the big discussion items that we have, so I guess I'll ask your opinion. A block is, oh, you weren't here for the discussion either.
No, I came.
Like
You're
one,
gonna be the market
like
board.
one street connecting, but not a 4-way intersection still constitutes a block, or would you just say the longest side? So if you have,
What's the
So
draw?
the
You
west
gotta-
side of a major corridor has 1,500 feet, but the east side has every 600 feet, there's like a T intersection or a connection. What constitutes block length along the corridor?
Between the intersections, but I probably do need the drawing. Look at that board back there.
lick your fingers.
Let's check your artistic.
All right, so
Yeah.
this is road A. This is too long.
Okay.
In your opinion,
in- per code.
well, that's what we're
Now, this
asking in
side- see,
definition.
This side has this going on. Here's the next 4-way.
So what would you use to measure your block length?
So, yeah, does having, does this constitute block length 1? This, block length 2 in measurement, block length 3, or do you have to go here?
Here's why I believe it does, but.
Well, let the professional
Yeah,
answer
yeah, yeah,
first.
absolutely.
We heard your comment.
So-
Doesn't the side of the street matter? Or are you just saying that
Where-
because?
This is a question. You better get it right.
Drop the mic.
So these are not complete blocks?
No, these would be, yeah, so these are streets.
Okay.
That might have, in some cases, they might have this might not be a complete block.
So I can tell you my opinion. The one on the left, like, I think when we think of a block, we think of a 4-sided shape. So what happens across the street is affecting a different block. I mean, lots and blocks is standard surveying stuff. So I think that the big block on the block length is talking about that big block on the left, and what happens across the street doesn't matter.
I agree. The purpose is for connectivity, right? So if you're a pedestrian and you're in the middle of that too long block and you need to get to the other side, in my opinion, the ordinance is so that you don't have to walk 1.5 miles to get around the block.
They use trespass.
Well, I think I always believe that in a public meeting, I have to agree with the city manager. I would agree that this is 3 blocks here, right? And that works fine. And this one sometime needs to be broken up if there's a way to do that someday. New development, existing, it's just what it is. But
And I think like even in this block length standard, as well as the sensitive lands, there's some stuff that kind of look at places where you can't make a connection and how you address that, because especially as we go up the hillside, there's going to be places where it's just too steep that you can't safely make a road.
Yeah.
And so how do we address that?
I think I disagree that current infill is a totally a limiting factor, just because there is something there. In my opinion, we're planning for things maybe 100 years away, right? And so we go, oh, hey, this auto body shop is here right now. I think we're looking too short term. And I think we got caught up in that tonight, in my opinion, a little bit, saying, oh, this thing's here, and so we got to design it this way. That's what I was trying to avoid. This commissioner's opinion.
Now, if there's, so a question to that is, if you've got, commercial, this is all commercial uses on the front, say, this is interior residential. So in the case tonight, if you had a cul-de-sac bulb going like this, and the road going, connecting through.
That's almost exactly what it was.
And this is hitting into existing commercial. So you were saying it's either this or you stub, and they reconfigure these last 2 lots, knowing that this commercial at some point might turn over. But what about if within 1,320 feet you have these agricultural parcels here, and then down below, which is the condition today, right here, these are all townhomes. A whole bunch of little townhomes right here. And this road may one day.
The scale keeps getting smaller and
This-
smaller.
The scale has changed a lot. This road's 800 feet wide. Sorry, everybody on Zoom. But what, if we lose this opportunity, there's still one here, I guess, within 1,320 feet. So who's the impacted property that you say, no, it's you that stubs, or is it everybody stubs? And then it just depends on who ultimately can make the connection.
Well, the general plan should dictate where that goes, right? The general plan called for connectivity, and
It doesn't, the full, if we have the full road outline, like full future roads plan, or major corridors plan, like 150 East, for instance, is a really easy road to say, you will not block 150 East, because it runs from 2550 south outside of our city, that runs into Harrisville. So that one is a really good, easy line, but I'm struggling with which one of the connections back to Washington is the one that you hang your connectivity hat on.
So let me, I think, drive home the point that you're making by looking at that actual area. So Washington Boulevard is not a limited access highway in the way that freeways and highways are, but we have an agreement that only allows certain points. Stop touching the mouse because it's freaking it out. But there's
Can you
only
dim the
certain
light there while you're
connections.
up?
What?
Can you dim the light while
Put
you're
that
up?
one light over there.
So we only have certain access points where UDOT is giving us full access to their road. And one of them is right here.
And
So-
tonight's project was right here.
So this is technically just a single commercial access. It's not a full access. But you can see when this subdivision went in, I'm not sure if this went in before that agreement was signed or after, but this should have been stubbed to eventually connect to here. And that would have eliminated your block length standard violation. but this got developed.
Well, that's the situation I was trying to prevent again,
Right.
that we keep just doubling down on, okay, houses are gonna be there, and then there's no way to connect it.
Yeah, and so the issue we have is that UDOT won't let this connection anyways, plus our ordinance says major roads, we don't have to. But in theory, the general plan anticipated this connection, and the city, none of us were here when this was approved, didn't force that stub here, which then would have allowed for that connection. But although we do now currently have a plan to make a connection that comes here and goes down, that's why the townhomes stub north and south, so that they can eventually wrap up and connect.
There's my mini scale townhome project.
Yeah.
Which will come like this.
And so are you gonna connect through here to out?
Yeah,
No.
so this here, these two connect
Okay.
and.
Connects north and south, not
This,
east
yeah,
and west.
this one here, this is blocked, so this is a cul-de-sac that comes back, it connects here and it connects here. So here, this is 150,
Yeah.
and then this is that other connection in and out right there. But the block effectively becomes 2175 down to 2000.
I guess that is another thing to consider is, because UDOT's connections are limited
Set in
distance.
stone.
Yeah, saying you can connect these places.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you can always do it, all right? I mean, that is in a sense that goal you've got, but I think when you're talking about Washington, that's maybe gonna be tough to accomplish, partially because of what's there already. I mean, you could hope that that commercial piece sometime disappears, but actually, commercial stuff disappears more often than other things, but I just think you're not always gonna be able to make it. And that's probably just the reality of it, really. And I was thinking with this one, which looked easier to me than that. You know, I would be looking at, well, that doesn't make sense because you're offsetting the intersection, you know? And I don't think we can do that. So down here, maybe we can make that work, but
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of factors to look at, but when you get to the UDOT roads, things get much more complicated.
Well, I think being that block lengths have come up, I think I don't know if I'm on my 9th or 10th year here, and I think it's been discussed on a project at least every year, where there's been an issue about, hey, we can't make it because of this, or no, you have to put a road in here because of block lengths. And so I think that's important that we have not only that description of what we need to have it be, but the whys and the ability for the change, you know, whether it's, you know, I think the topography or, you know, there's always discussion about, you know, the neighbors want one or they don't want one, you know, when you're connecting to an existing street and everybody comes in and tirade that they don't want another street connecting or vice versa.
Yeah. Looking at that picture, you got the cul-de-sacs that have the potential to go north, but those people on that cul-de-sac will absolutely hate the idea of having a road go through. But that's just a tough piece of this business that we have to kind of wade through, right?
The other thing though, I didn't notice in there, do we have a minimum?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
It's 400. 400.
Yeah,
400 feet between.
I just thought it said, it can't, it shouldn't be any less than 400, but it cannot be less than 400. Is that?
Yes, it's not less than 400.
Yeah,
There's a shell in the.
Is that?
I guess-
We have them all over.
I guess more, I'm not, I guess partly thinking in block lengths as minimums is more as offsetting intersections. You know, the minimum distance between those that's
Yeah.
allowed.
Generally 150 to 200 feet offset intersections. That allows for two less without too much interference.
Because that would be maybe, I don't know if that needs to be verbiage in one of the other things to adjust block lengths is to accommodate something. So that's not created.
That offset is in the engineering standards.
Okay,
Maybe we need to recognize that in here too.
yeah, I mean, I would think that would be something that would be a legitimate exception to make an adjustment
Yeah,
one way or another.
Yeah.
Whether it's, hey, this block's only gonna be 300 feet because
But like the blocks.
it's gonna line up the
that's across
intersection.
the street, so it's offset, but it's not affecting that particular block. It's related to the one across the street. That's what the offsets are dealing with.
Okay. Does that sum everything up? There was, what was the other one you wanted us to look at specifically?
it's just the tie-in connection and, there's some outs there for, not being able to tie into existing sidewalks. So just,
Oh, that's right, the
Yeah.
deferral on the sidewalks.
yeah, and then ask for a little escrow agreement for that, so, that's in there too.
When we do that, not that you're the answer to this, John, but the other John might be, do we have a limit in which the city is required to make good on that deferral? Like if somebody escrows money for an improvement to be done later, if it's not done within so many years, does that money go back to them, or does it force the city's hand to develop it?
I guess that mic doesn't work. I think that when we're looking at deferrals and escrows, I think that we'll need to do an analysis on whether or not the city's making a good financial move. Because if we're taking money now and it's not likely to be developed for 20 years, like that money, even with interest, will never be enough to cover the cost. And so I think we'll probably look at some situations.
Yeah, but John, what's the cost of maintaining a road? I mean, if we force them to build a small segment of road to nowhere, and then they deed it to the city, then you're basically chaining yourself to this maintenance, and you know what I mean? So.
Yeah. Well, no, and that's what I mean is that we need to look at all the factors and make a decision that's best for the city. Some stuff the developers can force on us, some stuff they can't. I know on the one that we looked at tonight on the preliminary plan, they didn't show a fire turnaround. And so how they address that as it goes up to the north end of that Rockwood Hills property is going to be an issue. The fire marshal would probably be okay with a hammerhead turnaround, which would allow for curb gutter and sidewalk to be installed on the north sides of those lots and maybe 20 feet of asphalt for a turnaround. It wouldn't be a road, but it would get part of the improvements and maybe reduce the escrow amount. So that's the kind of stuff, like we'd be maintaining a turnaround anyways. And so we just need to talk through some of that and figure out the right thing that makes the most sense for the city.
Because there's some things that I think it's probably more up to the city council when they grant the deferrals, but I want to make sure that it's not just on a whim they can decide, because I truly think, and I think the biggest thing is the sidewalks. We'll get an infill piece that's developed, and because there's no sidewalk on either side, they say, hey, we want to defer the sidewalk and not build ours for now. Well, the council may look at that and say, well, that makes sense. There's not sidewalk on either side, but having that forced to be put in sometimes is the catalyst to get the rest of it put in versus, oh, it's in deferral and it's money that the city may have in the bank for that, but it's never brought up again. And then all of a sudden, 15 years later, it's like, oh, hey, we need to address these sidewalks. So sometimes I think can be the opposite. It's the catalyst. There's some roads, I can't remember if it's the street with the dog park that doesn't have sidewalk on it, but if it did in some places, it's like, oh, maybe that can get bumped up the list of capital improvements to say, hey, there's already portions of this done. Let's get the rest done. Even though if it was deferred and the city had the money in the bank for those portions that weren't done anyway, for some reason mentally, it's just not there that, oh, we got to do the whole thing, even though there's funding for half of it already set aside.
Yeah.
So because I remember that we deferred that. This was not before my time, but I was in the city. That house on the corner of 2750 and 1050 East. 2750 North and 1050 East, if you remember. Mountain Road 1050 was narrow. There wasn't any sidewalk around that house. And it was just when we improved both streets around it forever and left it that way forever, and it's like just this piece that never got sidewalked that was a deterrent to people. It's like finally it came up and was done, but it's like sometimes allowing the deferrals is detrimental to us.
Yeah.
You know, and so I just want to make sure that it's not, we do have some stuff in there that because it would be a city council decision to allow a deferral, that they have some parameters that they have to meet to be able to allow it, rather than just, I like this guy, so we're not gonna make him do it.
So we have standards in there because that's another principle that we try to avoid in your ordinances, at the planning commission's discretion or the city council's discretion with no standards anywhere. So we've added standards in many places. It's the kind of things that you would normally base a decision on. So that's in there, and there are standards in there for that. And the only one I can remember offhand is the 100-foot. If it's closer than 100 foot, you gotta finish, you gotta take care of that. So, but take a look. Maybe there's other standards we need. So,
Okay.
yeah, that whole discretionary kind of thought is something the state legislature just really wants us all to get away from, that vagueness that nobody really knows what you're gonna do from one time to the next. So,
Well, and I think it's important to have good standards in there and instructions for the future.
Mhm.
Because, you know, our body, city council, even staff turn over.
right,
And, you know, it's what direction's the wind blowing at that time, but if we, at least it's a 4-step process to make a change rather than just a decision in one meeting, then it tends to hold better.
yeah, agreed.
Well, is that it?
That's it for me for tonight. Couple things to
Okay.
work on there.
Any other questions for
It
John?
wasn't part of our discussion going to be how the public chews this up, and did you have recommendations for that?
Yeah, so what we've been talking about is, Katie and I have talked about a website update that I've got text for that I just need to get to her to put on the website. And then just letting that sit out there for a month or so, and maybe do a, article in the connection. We could do Facebook posts, just encourage people to hit and see that site with the code changes, and it would have all 4 sections along with these, kind of the simplified versions of the major changes that have happened, and invite discussion, and then host an actual public hearing at this point, it would be like late August. So for the first public hearing for review, and then just make sure it doesn't feel like it was going fast. I want people to have an opportunity to have seen this on agendas multiple times, to know that this is a big change. And even though it's a reorganization, it's still, these are the opportunities you have these discussions that are gonna be that path to the future that the city wants. So
Is that a planning commission public hearing? Because we're going to be a recommended body to this, not,
Right.
yeah, so, okay.
So we would still hold a public hearing here, first public hearing, and then there would be a public hearing at the city council.
So there's not required to be the public hearing in the city council, but the council would like to, or we would like the council to get public comments there as well.
Well,
Because it's such a big,
so if
ordinance.
your intention is to let it bake out there for a while, do you think August seems like pushing it, just because July's
doesn't-
vacation month?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. I mean, if we don't need to.
Well, I think we only have one meeting in August anyway, right?
Is our second meeting canceled for planning commission? I think.
thought it
no,
was-
just the,
I thought the first one was the one with the city council. Oh,
No, I'm sorry, you guys have 2 meetings.
oh, well, for some reason I thought it was only one.
No, it's city council there's a budget hearing that's usually a canceled meeting. And then there's an employee appreciation event that's on the other city council meeting. So we're likely
That's,
holding,
okay.
so, yeah, so it's the tax hearing on the 3rd. The 10th is the primary elections. And then the 24th is the employee appreciation party, which you're all invited to,
The pool party.
the pool party.
For some reason, I thought it was the pool party that was on the night of our meeting.
Yeah, so
We
your
should change
meeting
that.
will be on the 4th still. And the 4th and the 18th will be the planning commission meetings that month.
probably should change that because it messes up the whole city council agenda. Like it only gives one opportunity in the month. So maybe that is something to think about. Then you have a chance to have a regularly scheduled city council and a regularly scheduled planning commission. At any rate.
It's too late. It
It's
has
too
been
late,
in
yes.
flyers and in people's fridge magnets for months. Okay. Any other discussion? Thanks, John.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're down to the end. Anything from planning? Planning commissioners?
Is one of the perks of being on the planning commission access to the North Ogden dump, the green waste bin,
No.
or is it not? I'd just like to know the definition so I know what to tell the poor person that doesn't know who I am.
There's no perks.
Okay, all right.
You're
I need to come
drinking
down.
your perk.
That's
That is
right.
the only thing.
Okay. I will be coming down and buying a punch pass. So, and I'll probably just have to throw a couple of them in the garbage because I've been telling the poor lady that works there, no, it's cool, I'm an employee. So,
You can save it for next year.
yeah, I had a bunch, I used all those, and then I started like, oh, this is free, so,
Maybe next year.
okay.
Talk about
I just
that
want to
in
know what the
January
rule was,
meeting.
I think I've been abusing that, not maliciously. Now everyone knows on YouTube.
Any other comments, commissioners? Scott, anything from you?
Just two quick things. The July 21st meeting is looking like a very full agenda, so just be prepared for that. We've got a few zoning text amendments that we're going to consider. There's a site plan, so we've got a handful of items coming for July 21st. And then the general plan committee met the fourth Wednesday of last month. They meet the fourth Wednesday of each month. And they, with staff's help, we put some recommendation together for areas of what I would call housing choice or additional intensity. And those we're going to be taking forward with Commissioner Barker or City Council Member Barker on July 13th to just preview those as a discussion item with the City Council. We don't want the General Plan Committee to get too far ahead of what the City Council is doing. We also want to kind of preview and show them what is happening. And then I figure that that'll be brought back to Planning Commission in August sometime for that same type of discussion. So we're gonna have a City Council discussion, then we'll come back to General Plan Committee at the end of July, shore up any of those recommendations or changes that the City Council saw from our first recommendations, and then I imagine we'll bring that back to General or to you guys to preview and take a look at it. That's all I have.
Okay. John?
Yeah, two quick things. One of which I thought, or I forgot, maybe I'll remember. If you can, please remind neighbors and those who you interact with that secondary water is likely going to be shut off early. We haven't, I don't believe anything's been published by Pineview yet. I don't know about our northern secondary water provider, if they're going to shut off early or not. But Pineview most likely will. And you can't water your lawn with culinary water. The council will likely allow people to water shrubs and gardens with it. So just as you know, and if you know anyone who's planning on installing landscaping, tell them to wait till spring, because there won't be any leeway on the culinary water use. It'll be pretty substantial fines. And then on the, if you've received questions about the little cottages accumulating down on Washington Boulevard, code enforcement and planning are working on that issue, addressing the concern and helping bring that property back into compliance. If anyone asks you what's happening, it's always been told to us as a temporary storage, but that's not allowed. And so we're on top of that and working on it, but there's rumors about it being permanent, and even the landowner has said that's not a permanent thing. So for what it's worth, it's always been a temporary thing, but even that's not allowed. So just if anyone asks about either of those two things. And then obviously, like I said, the 24th is the employee appreciation party, of which you are a group of employees. So come and participate. And
Without access to the green waste bin.
well, and So the one, I will say some of our employees do get, the employees who work for the city can buy green waste passes, even if they don't live in the city. So that is a perk to non-resident employees, but for the most part, it's everyone still has to pay to use it.
Okay, I'm fine with that, and I'm also fine with you giving employees perks.
Yeah.
You know how I feel about city employees. Like,
Yeah.
I want them treated well, so.
But the mayor doesn't get perks. He has to.
He
work
gave all
for-
that up
he
when he
has to
signed
mow
up
the
for
lawn.
the job.
So anyways,
Okay.
that's what I've got, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, being that you're here tonight, do you have anything for us?
No, sir, just appreciate your service.
Okay, thank you. All right. Motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.